Welcome to Belmont Poetry Night. I'm Monica Korde, your host and the Poet Laureate of Belmont, California. We meet on the third Tuesdays of every month to celebrate the spoken word as makers, listeners, and admirers of poetry. We come with featured guests and an open mic, inviting readers of all ages. After gathering for several years at our favorite physical venue, the Belmont Library, since the pandemic, our thriving poetry circle has transitioned to this virtual space, and I'm grateful this allows me to welcome poets and listeners from across the globe. It is always a joy to see you all in the audience. And tonight, especially with this howling wind and storm and the anxiety of having a power outage while in session, your reassuring presence is very calming for me. So thanks for joining me and zooming in. As the tradition goes, I'd love to know where you are joining me from. So please share in the chat. And onwards we go. Happy World Poetry Day, everyone, and happy spring. Although the ongoing rainstorm doesn't create a very happy picture with the power outages, the flooding, and the downed trees that we have all been experiencing and been a witness to, still, I'm here with the hope that this evening will restore much needed calm. And I have curated this poetry night in the theme of eco-poetry, taking a leap. And while I was thinking of this and thinking of how poetry has always asked us to reflect on our relationships with the world beyond the human. One of poetry's strengths is its insistence on the power of noticing, of paying attention. And it also asks us to make connections between things that might be too distant from our reality. But it becomes particularly powerful when we connect across scales from the smallest thing to the biggest things, like understanding how the environment works, what effect a storm has on everything around us, beginning from our gardens, our backyards, and streets, and leaping on to meadows and reservoirs, plants and animals. And eco-poetry can make this leap happen for us. It can bring more consciousness to the thought of our role in preserving the natural world and our connection to the ecosystem as a whole. I'd like to open this evening with a poem that does exactly this. The poem is titled Characteristics of Life and is written by poet Camille Dungy. It begins with this epigraph from BBC Nature News. A fifth of animals without backbones could be at risk of extinction, say scientists. Characteristics of life. Ask me if I speak for the snail, and I will tell you I speak for the snail. Speak of underneathedness and the welcome of mosses, of life that springs up, little lives that pull back and wait for a moment. I speak for the damselfly, water skeet, mollusks, the caterpillar, the beetle, the spider, the ant. I speak from the time before spinelessness was frowned upon. Ask me if I speak for the moon jelly. I will tell you one thing today and another tomorrow, and I will be as consistent as anything alive on this earth. I move as currents move with the breezes. What part of your nature drives you? You, in your cubicle, ought to understand me. I filter and filter and filter all day. Ask me if I speak for the nautilus, and I will be silent as the nautilus shell on a shelf. I can be beautiful and useless if that's all you know to ask of me. Ask me what I know of longing, and I will speak of distances between meadows of night-blooming flowers. I will speak the impossible hope of the firefly. You, with the candle burning, and only one chair at your table, must understand such wordless desire. To say it is mindless is missing the point. Thank you. A voice that speaks for nature. Isn't this eco poem simply stunning? And did you notice how powerfully the speaker enters this space of deep empathy for other living beings right as the poem opens? Ask me if I speak for the snail. I will tell you I speak for the snail. Colorado-based author and editor of numerous volumes of nonfiction and poetry, Camille T. Dungy is an expert in eco and African American poetics. She tackles issues of race and environment through much of her work that expands on the natural world and our relationship to it. With us tonight, to take us forward in this conversation about poetry and the natural world, we have another significant voice whose work in poetry, in nonfiction, as well as in collage art, looks into nature and our relationship to it through an ecological, historical, and colonial lens. It is my pleasure and honor to have and introduce this brilliant artist and my featured poet for the evening, Caroline Goodwin. Caroline Goodwin moved to the San Francisco Bay Area from Sitka, Alaska in 1999 to attend Stanford as a Wallace Stegner Fellow in Poetry. Her recent books are Old Snow, White Sun by Jackleg Press, Washington, D.C., Madrigals by Big Yes Press, Arroyo Grande, California, and Matanuska by Aquifer Press, Wales, UK. She teaches at California College of the Arts, Stanford Continuing Studies, and UC Berkeley Extension. From 2014 to 16, she served as the first Poet Laureate of San Mateo County. She lives on the coast with Jimi Hendrix, the pug, and you can find her on her website, which is www.carolinegoodw.com. I've had the opportunity to learn from her, and as her student, even outside of class, I have fondly come to call her Professor. So, welcome, Professor.
Monica, thank you so much. And thanks to everyone for being here. And you're right, what a pleasure. And it's very calming and soothing when there's this weather event to just be in the space with the intention of listening and sharing and considering these, really important topics that we're facing as human beings. But I sure appreciate being here. And yeah. So should I just jump right in and start reading? Before I start, though, I would like to say welcome. I see a lot of my students and some people who I know in name and people who may not know one another, but I've always had a really strong belief in the poetry community and how powerful it can be to just know that there are people who take you seriously as an artist, will ask you the hard questions and continue to support your creativity. And I just have this strong memory of wonderful Monica traveling to Berkeley on a moped with your husband, right?
On the motorcycle,
on the
yes.
motorcycle. Well, there were helmets. And I was so impressed, and it was wonderful. And there were also, I remember, beautiful poems about rain, or at least one poem that you had,
yes,
that you wrote about rain. So see, it all comes together. I also have to say that I am at my brother-in-law's house in Half Moon Bay because there's no power at my house. And another branch came down off the same tree. A branch came down in January and punched a big hole in my garage roof, and that got all fixed. And then I was sitting there just hanging out with my beautiful dogs and getting ready for the day when I heard the sound again. And luckily it missed my neighbor's truck, but it didn't miss my power lines. And so, yeah, so it was a long and stressful day, but it's really nice to end it with poetry. And I'm going to start by reading a few poems, and we'll have a Q&A with Monica, but I have chosen several poems from my recent collection called Matanuska. And this is, I'll just say quickly and briefly that the poems I consider the whole book I consider my COVID project, where I would get up in the morning at the beginning of the pandemic and record the worldwide COVID-19 death count and the moment and the exact moment and date of that count. And then I would choose a plant from a book called Discovering Wild Plants, Alaska, Canada, the Pacific Northwest, and I would take some language from the page, whatever page I opened up to if I hadn't written it before, and weave in a snippet of language from that page 3 times. So this whole book is a collection of 17-line poems, and I was sort of let myself be guided by my ear. And I also want to say that a few years ago, Camille Dungy came and gave a reading at the Belmont Library when she came through town, and that was a wonderful event. And yeah, her Black Nature for 400 years of African-American nature poetry is just a fabulous anthology that everyone should have. So anyway, so you'll hear a death count worldwide, a date, and a particular time of that count, and then the common name of a plant. I'm not going to subject you to my mispronunciations of the the Latin names of the plants, because that'll be awkward. So here we go. This first one is, sorry, let me just make sure. Let me see. Oops, sorry. Okay, there we are. Okay, this is March 23rd, 2020, 0855 Pacific Daylight Time, 15,491. Saskatoon. Service berries fresh from the shrub, from the rugged hillside, or sweeping panic from the dream, the fistful of willow, pulp, puzzle bark, collarbone, or inner ear, muskox, bone, marrow, spoon. And when you say the seeds have a pleasant almond-like flavor, I listen, I do. And when your words turn to pollen, and when a light flashes up and multiplies, service berries fresh from the shrub, from the halibut spine and socket, silver fin and hogback trail and pemmican, shale, cedar bowl, blue-black poem, snowblind, your fine basketry, your green thought in a green, savory fruit. In all my thirst for freedom, for spirit, when winter streamed in, the stained glass prism, the pleural cavity, footprint, hoarfrost, love, service berries fresh from the shrub. And so that's 17 lines of sort of a collage poem, found poem. The next one is on April 6, 2020. So I'm realizing it's just right about 3 years ago at 0850 Pacific Daylight Time, 73,603. Crane's Bill. Best differentiated from the deadly monkshood when flowering occurs, when leaves toughen with age, or with the flock of cranes arriving from the east, the lucky direction, their beaks filled with salves and cures, palmate or deeply cleft, seed capsule, inoculation, cloud wing and vapor, the mushroom shape or the olive, the shell money or solemnity, thurible, myrrh. When I place one hand in the soil, what is best differentiated from the deadly monkshood when breathing occurs, when a gift of beetles or unicellulars, when a badge of fair youth or paper, occasional prayer, sentinel bird, mask, fig, ballast of the swallowed stone. Is it you? Is it your migration song against the wind? In a million filaments of loose web,
Recording in progress.
Best differentiated from the deadly monk's hood. So that is a couple of poems from Matanuska, which is the name of a glacier in south central Alaska, and a river that my family, we'd drive up north along the banks of the Matanuska River, and it was this really powerful, dangerous river that kind of had an effect on me when I was little. I just knew that, nature isn't always friendly, and, we owe it some respect.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing both of those pieces, Professor. I'd like to quote some lines from each of them. And the first piece that you shared, I listen, I do, and when your words turn to pollen, and when a light flashes up and multiplies, service berries fresh from the shrub. And the second piece, I love this line where it comes in. When I place one hand in the soil, what is best differentiated from the deadly monkshood when breathing occurs? And these 17-line poems, as you mentioned, I think they carry a whole landscape within themselves. And my first question to you is, nature and environment informs much of your writing, and nature poetry has been classified into many subcategories. But since your nature poems take an ecocentric view, which is at the heart of ecopoetry, do you see yourself as an eco-poet and your work as eco-poetry?
Yeah, great thoughts and questions, and thank you for noticing those lines. And yeah, I mean, I would hope that people would see my work as eco-poetry. I mean, I feel as though one of the things that's important to me is to investigate the complexity of this planet, this beautiful, amazing planet that we share, and its gifts, and its surprises and its ways of being with us. And I think of there's a British poet, Harriet Tarlow, who I was listening to her talk about responding to plants, and she said, we think of plants as being stationary. They don't move around, but they move. Like they're moving all the time. They're making energy, and they're moving. They just don't move the way we move. So like being able to think that these other beings, that plants are sacred beings, and that they are moving, they just have a different sort of matrix, right? Or system of movement. So, I mean, I don't know, to be honest, all that much about the different categories of eco-poetry, but I do know that for, as long as we've had poetry, I think one of the wonderful things about this art form is that it can help us appreciate and celebrate, that we are on this planet, and we have a responsibility. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that reminds me of another professor at Berkeley. He teaches eco poetry, John Shoptaw. And when he was asked the question, why eco poetry, he mentions because there's no planet B.
Yeah, it's true.
So it makes a lot of sense to understand that these subcategories in nature poetry exists, and that nature poetry can go beyond appreciating the gifts of nature and the beauty in nature that we see.
Yeah. I mean, I think nature poetry, it should, and good poems should ask us to go beyond appreciation to something more complicated.
Absolutely. Thank you, Professor. And please, if we can hear the next few poems that you have to offer.
But of course. Oh, yeah. I'm ready. Okay. And the language that you hear repeated 3 times is lifted from this plant guide that belonged to my late husband. I didn't really realize that it was his until I always thought of it like, that's my plant book. But then I'd been like, looking at it for a while, and I realized it's like full of his notes and his highlights. And I thought, oh, well, it's another way of me sort of spending time with him and thinking about him. So, okay, so this one on April 29th, 2020, 0928 Pacific Daylight Time, 220,413, Neptune's Girdle. Plants have wonderful common names as well. Said to contain every trace mineral known in the same concentration as human blood, and where the leaf-like translucent blades, the amphibious overall dietary pattern, where we celebrate wild edibles, lichens, knives and shadows, the oxygen and dust. If we could not breathe the Arctic night air and inference of winter, there was at least the mist, glacial film, the frond, the field glass, the ordinary ash tree, and phycoerythrin, which masks the green said to contain every trace mineral known, every specimen held before us, every genome and phenotype and aurora, days before the flood, before the fish, tadpole, isopod, lepidopteral flurry. And what would happen? Whose fingers I counted at birth years ago, that low growing rose said to contain every trace mineral known. There is a line there from the poem, a poem called The Blossom by the late great poet Evan Boland, whose fingers I counted at birth years ago. It's a line that sticks with me. Okay, on June 4th, 2020, 0854 Pacific Daylight Time, 388,759, dwarf nettle. Flowers are inconspicuous, occurring in small drooping clusters. Leaves yield fibers you can twist into string and weave into strong rope. And it is said, the stone cut the stepping stone that stained glass, the half-dead apple tree, a little window to the soul. And even my brother's twin engines, pistons, and the air filling with a poisonous fog, red-tailed. But one might say that everything is beautiful, provided that it comes in its time and place. And on the contrary, nothing can be beautiful which comes at the wrong time, as in flowers are inconspicuous, occurring in small knots or knuckles, and a long arm or shadow crawled over the land. Or we just this moment notice the chill or a gust of wind, or the seeds caught in our eyelashes, metal shavings, whose flowers are inconspicuous, occurring in small. So there's a couple more from Matanuska, Monica.
Those were beautiful. And I love how your poems demand us to lean into the beauty of the small, like that low growing rose said to contain every trace mineral known. And in the constant slow hum of repeating lines as well that come through in your pieces, flowers are inconspicuous, occurring in small. I feel there is a sense of abundance in your writing. Is abundance a conscious theme of your choice? And
Yeah.
because in your lists and plant poems, in particular, they illustrate the abundance of the world. And yeah, tell us how does the idea of abundance figure in when you're writing?
Yeah, thanks. I'm noticing in the chat that people are saying that my volume is a little low. So is that better? I'm going to speak up a little bit. Maybe I'm sort of like, I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe if
My
you want
voice
to
is
just
soft.
move in closer to the screen, that might help.
How about that? Good. How's that?
I can hear you perfectly, so I hope
Okay. I
yeah,
hope, yeah. I
everyone
hope
can.
everyone can hear me. Yeah, abundance. I mean, I think that too much of the time I myself, when I'm in fear or anxiety, it's partly because I don't trust this sense of abundance that the world really can offer. I mean, I know we have a lot of problems on the planet, and I know that it's important to remember that sharing and figuring out ways to make decisions about our resources is important, but also I think it's important to remember that like love is abundant. These things that we that are, free, like looking at the sky or looking at the ocean. The sky, just reminds me that I'm not here forever. And yet there is so much mystery, and I don't know what happens. None of us really knows. I mean, we can think we know, but we don't know. Nobody really knows. So I choose to make choices that help me feel the abundance of things like love and beauty and just infinity, and I think nature, when we really look at it, it's like that Hopkins poem, and for all this nature is never spent, there lives the dearest something deep down things, dearest freshness deep down things. And he had the spiritual belief system and was very religious, but yeah, I think about abundance, and I hope to convey a sense of abundance and hope and those things that we need. I need.
And that, yes, so that we all need. Thank you for sharing that, Professor. I think it makes a whole lot of sense that what every poet brings in through their perspectives. And also, since you are looking at nature through a certain lens, it just carries forward your idea of and shows the sensitive soul that you also are. And you have, it just reflects all of that and mirroring the abundance of the things around us, that makes a lot of sense in our own lives as well. Well, thank you for sharing that. And yeah, let's go on to the next piece.
All right, rock and roll. Okay, so speaking of Hopkins, I wrote, so Hopkins had this series of sonnets they call the Terrible Sonnets, where he felt really separated from God. I've read that he didn't, Gerard Manley Hopkins didn't lose faith in God, but just felt like he was separated from God, and it was very scary for him. So this Carry Comfort is one of the Terrible Sonnets, and it starts with I'll not carry in comfort, despair, not feast on thee. So this is one of 3 poems in a sequence called I'll not lay a lion limb, tie up the branch, ask too soon for the ring or even for the word. In the rush's explosions, when we rediscover one another, the hill takes on unseemly proportions, grows by spreading, by a frond, by a tower of jewels. At some point, the lobed or divided leaves of the violet, the loved, the swarm of bluebottles, and even a cluster of tiny antennae. In the swaying grasses, I heard all the voices. Too late, too late, too late. The tilting room, the silver anklet. So that's number 1.
Thank you, Professor. If we can just take a pause before you offer the rest of the 2 poems in the sequence. And I'm sorry to pause you if that was supposed to be flowing in a sequence.
No, it's.
Can you all still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Monica.
Thank you, David. I think we have lost Caroline Goodwin. I'll just pause for a minute. I'll pause the recording. So, Professor, my next question to you is on the subject of ecopoetics and loss. Tell us how you found yourself gravitating towards it and finding your own way through grief and considering your relationship to the natural world. How did that affect you as a poet?
Yeah, great stuff. You know, I teach classes more than a lot of people I know, and I've always been connected to nature ever since I was a kid. And I have a degree in biology, and then I went to get an MFA in poetry. But as I'm very grateful now that I've had this sort of long-standing, you know, decades-long connection with nature, because we really just we are nature, and we all pass away. And so losing my husband in 2016 was super traumatic, but I also have a lot of ways to heal from that loss, and being, you know, having a creative practice is one powerful way. Loss is part of the cycle of, you know, the universe in which we live, and it you know, as my late father said, you know, none of us has avoided it yet, you know. So being able to articulate my sadness and my fear and all that kind of stuff has just been, it's been, you know, it's been really, really great. It's helped me out a lot, you know. Yep. I think you're still muted, Monica. Here we go.
Sorry. Along with nostalgia, I think poems often give us that healing space as well. So it is wonderful to hear that in your experience as well.
Yeah, I'm, you know, I feel lucky and grateful, actually.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, let's hear another piece from the sequence.
Okay. This is Not, I'll Not, and you'll hear a word awen, which is Welsh for the breath or inspiration. Not, I'll not feast on thee, all the way to Yellowknife, all the way to the lake. The word was awen, the word was fish. I pronounced the word to you in the muskox room at eventide under the quilt. At YouTube headquarters, the shooter came out on her knees. On her curlew, muskrat, bittern, anemone bulb, and fin. When I carry the wooden bowl, it's your hand when I fall, when I burn out to the rising sun. Oh Lord, oh flannel shirt, oh salmon leather fireside chat. I'll be the one on the sidewalk, rolling up the fragrant leaves. Here's a weird one for you.
No, I especially really resonate, those last lines resonate with me. I'll be the one on the sidewalk rolling up the fragrant leaves. And I was planning on pausing for a question here, but since there was a glitch, I think it would be a good idea to, I'll let you finish the sequence and the final poem in that, and then we can go on to your collage art that we can.
That'd be fabulous. Yeah, thank you.
Let's
Thank
do
you
that.
for your patience. So not, I'll not, be heron, be oblivion. Where you at? If I push the wheel, suffering. If I speak the dreams of others, others. If I hold you tight and light up the rose fountain, break the sky. Will you come to me then, blue skull, be me, be mine? Indeed, there will be time after dark for the silver owl, the seawall, green paint. My breath along the waterway, how it finds you, opens the pistil and ovary, the ornamental rush. I am the one you've been waiting for all this time. I am the pasture and sedge, turning and turning under fences, light.
Gorgeous. Really grateful for both of these pieces. I love these lines which come through so strong. Be heron, be oblivion, where you at? If I push the wheel, suffering. If I speak the dreams of others. I love how your poems really encourage the reader to just move forth and move on, even while reading. Like you said, you listen to the poem and you have an ear for how it goes. And when I read your poems, and I have two of your books, I have the Old Snow, White Sun, and the Paper Tree from a while back. But in the
Thank you.
poems, I always feel that there is this quality of going forward and moving on and keep on moving, where it, even in our breath, in the way I'm reading the poems, they just ask me to continue reading the piece until I come to the very end of it. So I love that quality, and there is so much that goes into the making of a poem. I feel that the emotional intimacy with which you engage in your work, uh, not only as a poet, but it also comes through in your work as a visual artist while constructing or creating collages. And those of you who didn't know about it, Caroline Goodwin is a wonderful artist, and she creates these amazing collage pieces. And talking about the process of collage, which moves from the simple gluing down of a sentimental collection of objects or found things to a viable form of artistic expression, the stage in which fragments combine in such a way that allows for an opening, a perspective that shapes new levels of meaning. As a collagist, how does this medium of artistic expression equate to your expression as a poet? And while you answer that, I will go ahead and share the slides for so that everybody can take a look at some of those artworks.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much, Monica. I really appreciate it, because I became interested in collage when I took a class actually with North Wales-based performance artist named Rhys Trimble, and he and other poets in the class were doing these sort of more visual, concrete poems, and you know, incorporating like huge text and tiny text, and then also images. And I started to think about how, you know, in poetry, we make the leap. Like the whole theme of tonight is like the leap, you know, in our imagination, we're always sort of leaping, or that sort of looks like this, or we leap into the past, memory comes and we remember something. And I started to think about all the different ways in which a poem can use juxtaposition, images, tones, just even words change when we put them in different contexts, and against other words. And so I've always sort of been interested in that as a poet. But when I started to, you know, cut out tiny pieces of paper and make rules for myself, I think form is another thing that is important to poets and also to collage. I took a class also at the San Francisco Center for the Book on collage, and I'd learned just enough to just make it so exciting and so interesting to just show up and see what might happen. And because you can, you know, put a really detailed piece of paper next to a, you know, a very sort of, you know, plain piece of paper, or you can tear a piece of paper and have a jagged edge next to a sharp edge. You can have diagonal going down the page, or you can have in horizontal, you can have round things next to square things, which is its whole own particular conversation. And so I just became interested in maybe the conversation and how, as we go about our lives, these objects appear, right? It's like when you learn a new word, you know, we all know when you learn a new word, then like the next 3 days, you know, 5 people use the word 10 times and you've never heard the word before in your life. It's like the weirdest thing, but it's true. And it's this connection with the mystery and the unknown and the forces that we don't understand. So I made 7 rules for myself. I don't buy anything if I can help it. I use stuff I find on my walks or lying around on the floor in my house, like my teenage daughter's eyelashes. I used to like look down and like see, I was like, what is that? Is that an insect? And it was like, no, it was like false eyelashes on the floor, you know, things like that. But you can use those things and you say, hey, wait a minute, I need that for the antenna, right, of this particular beetle right now. Perfect. Thank you, universe. Do you want to just,
I love that.
I don't want to talk too long, Monica, if you want to just like scroll through them, or
Yeah, let's do that. Yeah,
okay.
let's
Yeah.
go on to one of the The first one here is halibut and birch tree.
Yeah. So, you know, one of the rules I had was to have my late husband's image, his sweet face in each collage, and then this particular picture of me when I was about 10 years old looking for frogs in a meadow north of Anchorage, and
Oh
to
yeah,
have
I
some
can
of
see
his
that down
handwriting.
here.
Yeah, that's me. And then to have some contemporary poetry,
Mhm.
that's Hopkins there, the fleece of his foam flutes and low to the lake falls home,
Right.
Innisfree, or I think that's, and then in its manifold dark arms is Louise Glick. And if you want to play around with collage, you know, use your old envelopes, because they have tiny little wonderful patterns. As you can see, the sort of gills of the halibut are, yeah, right there.
Oh right, and are these
Envelope.
beads? Do I see
Yeah,
beads
beads,
here?
seed beads. Yep, those are seed beads. Yeah,
That
that
is
was one of
very
my first
cool.
ones. I did that in Reese Trimble's class.
And I'm reading the description here, which says paper glue, purple Sharpie, nail polish,
Yeah,
and cat claw.
yeah. There's a cat claw in the eye of the halibut that I found on the floor
Oh.
when I had a cat. And I think that's actually the black nail polish is like, you know how birch trees kind of look like they have eyes,
Oh,
like, you
right.
know, looking out at you. Yeah, so
Wow, that is very cool. Let's look at this next one, which is one of my favorites.
thank you. Yeah, this has some Dylan Thomas bearing the farm away all the moon long. The owls were bearing the farm away all the moon long up the side. And then on the top is the famous Wallace Stevens, the house was quiet and the world was calm. And yeah, there's Nick in his wedding tux and me leaning into him.
Oh yeah, I can the pictures here down
Yeah.
here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is also very intricate work, with all the little spaces that you have found to fit everything in. It's just very intricate and beautifully done.
Thank you.
And
Yeah.
there is, I mean, when you think of collages, at least when I think of collages, it is a lot of gluing and pasting and patchy kind of a work. But
Mm-hmm.
when you get engaged with it, it also there is a certain sense of calm in that chaos which you can find. So
Oh,
you there is so much neatness and organization that you can find in all the patchy work that you see.
so much calm. Like, I am such a fan. I would just do it all day if I could. So much fun. Just make
I
up some
hope,
rules for yourself and start cutting stuff out and see what
yeah, it's really
how you
gorgeous, and I
learn.
hope everyone is enjoying these pieces as we are moving forward. Let's look at these two.
Yeah, so this
Both of them are very
on the
different.
left. Yeah, on the left I have, so I listen for, you know, whatever is sort of coming up. And the sunflower, I can't remember how that came along, but there's some beads in the center of the sunflower, and then Nick's
Mhm.
face 3 times, and there's that picture of me again, which I try to put. And then I have a friend in Southeast Alaska who makes these gorgeous calendars with watercolors. So that
Oh
what I
wow!
learned in the collage class is like the softness of a watercolor sort of next to the sharpness or hardness of text. And
Right.
then I started incorporating some of my daughter's scientific, no, I don't know, that's from her chemistry class there. And then there's a line there from our second San Mateo County Poet Laureate, Lisa Rosenberg, which is sort of goes up. Yeah, you're past flat on the table and dull as something. Flat on the table and dull as tin. That's what it is. Yeah. So it's
Right.
a line from Lisa Rosenberg's book, A Different Physics. But yeah, that was a fun one. And you maybe see a little cut up Van Gogh thick paint in the petals of the sunflower. And then the Sphinx moth. And when I first moved here from Alaska, we lived in East Palo Alto. And one night, right outside our window, there was this white line Sphinx moth. And I ended up writing a poem about it. It's in my first book, Trapline, at writing a poem for Nick. But it was this beautiful moth that looked like a hummingbird, and we caught it. And if you don't know what a white line Sphinx moth is, you have a treat coming, because there's just gorgeous, gorgeous moths. And there's some weird objects in there that I found. And then also, like, sometime, I found this was a quote, as misspelled Muriel Rekiser, "My lifetime listens to yours." It like popped out of this book that I pulled off the shelf. It was just
Oh,
piece of paper that was in there. So I'm
that's
like,
what
well,
I was wondering about the title as well.
yeah, misspelled. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the poet's name is not spelled correctly.
And there's a whole lot of work that goes into this, and I see that your collage appears on two of your book covers
Yes.
as well, on your poetry collections, Matanuska and Madrigals.
hmm Yeah, these ones, this one on the left, the blue milkweed beetle. So I just get an image from nature, that something that I'm thinking about, or just looking at, early in the day when I'm kind of poking around. And this one has a line by, there's a wonderful East Bay poet, Donna de la Perriere. She has a great couple of books, True Crime and Saint Erasure. And this is from one of her poems, Always Begins in the Woods. Begins in the Woods, always begins the same way. This sort of creepy poem with a piece of the prelude of Wordsworth down the edge. And then also
Right.
the white space in my collages is always in my mind. It's
Right.
always death. Like, it's always
Oh,
like, that
interesting.
is the unknown, and the kind of the great beyond. And the poem is this
Right.
sort of membrane between us and the great beyond. And this, Moondog Pelican, like, Moondog was this homeless New York street artist who made all his own instruments. And I was reading a lot about him, and I used one of his quotes down the bill of the pelican. So this is a pelican with the pelican eye, and Moondog says in one of his poems, "Death, when you come to me, may you come to me swiftly. I would rather not linger. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, boy, howdy. And so I think our lives can feel overwhelming and chaotic, and collage is just a fantastic way to bring some order and some healing, and it's just full of surprises. So I'm a
Yeah.
fan.
Yeah, no, and I'm a fan of your artwork as well, and that's what I love about to bring about through these poetry nights and conversations with the featured artist, is that they are not just one person. There are so many dimensions to this one person, and I love that we can bring these out in our conversations, and to see your work as an artist, as a visual artist, and how you think of these things. I'm really curious to know whether does an image come to you first, or a thought or a word comes to you first when you are starting to create a collage?
I think an image, I think maybe, or something in conversation. Like, sometimes I'll be talking to someone and they'll be like, "Oh, I love pelicans. It's my favorite bird." And I'll think, man, pelicans are pretty cool, and start thinking about them and how
Mhm.
sort of strange and awkward and prehistoric and beautiful they are. And then, like, a couple days later, we have a friend who's here tonight whose pelicans are very special to her, and she'll say something about the pelican. I'll be like, okay, that's a sign. The next thing is a pelican. And the blue milkweed beetle actually is this photographer who went to high school with my friend Angela Newman in a small town in Kentucky. And she had told me, you should look at his photographs. They're really beautiful. And I just had been wanting to do an insect. Nick really loved insects, and I saw that on his website, so it's serendipity and synchronicity, and just being open to and then trusting. That's where I think
Right.
we get into trouble, because we're like, that's too weird, or or, that didn't just happen. Did it? And then you're like, yeah, it did, because the universe is telling you that your next collage, or you just heard, you were in Pacifica and you heard a great horned owl, or you think you did, so trusting the leap and the weirder pockets of the mind will bring collage.
Absolutely. One of my questions towards the end was about talking about how art is healing, which I think you have already answered while taking us through the collages. Thank you so much, Professor. Thanks once again for all the offerings. And I think poets do such important work along with scientists and environmentalists to encourage the discourse on the relationship between human world and natural world. And I'm really grateful for your work that at once heals and empowers nature as well as the self. I'm really grateful for having you tonight.
Thank you, Monica. I'm so proud of you and being Poet Laureate of Belmont and all the great work you're doing. And so I'm super grateful for the invitation. Yay.
Pleasure is all mine. I'll open the floor up briefly for questions or comments from the audience before we close the segment. So please go ahead and unmute yourselves if you would like to just share your thoughts and anything else. I'll just go ahead and share links to Caroline's work in the chat.
Thanks, Monica.
Could I ask whether you cite the authors and the source for the, like when you quote a line in the poetry? So
I do.
Collage, is it like on the back of the collage or somewhere, or where do you?
Yeah, I do. I usually tell the poet or ask, permission, of course. And usually the poet's like, oh, sure, of course, and I think in the title of the piece, I usually say the poet's name, and then, but I mean, also there's fair use. I mean, I know there's copyright law and stuff like that. And my hope is that, Wallace Stevens will be like, cool, from beyond the grave. Or if not, then someone would tell me like, you need to fix that. Yeah, I hope that helps.
If it's just one line, it's probably fair. It's probably fair use if it's just a single line.
Yeah, I think so. And I just, that's part of my trusting. In fact, when I was reading the Not Heron, there's a group called Heron Oblivion. It's a contemporary super group, rock group. And I saw them at the chapel in San Francisco, and really wonderful lyrics. And so be Heron, be Oblivion. Some of the lines in there from their songs, but everyone should listen to their music. Heron, Oblivion.
Well, I was captivated by both your poetry and your collage. And I'm just curious about your decision to use 17 lines and how that affected your writing.
Oh, great. Yeah. I mean, I made up this form. I have a friend named Hugh Baim Steinberg, who's an Oakland-based poet. He has a book called Shy Green Fields that is 100 7-line love poems. And one of the, I mean, they're so wonderful. He's really wonderful and nutty and smart. And one of the lines, I was just thinking of it this morning, is I can be a king of white smoke. I can canter. Like, and if you know Hugh, it's like you have this image of him cantering and you're like, whoa, that's crazy. So I thought, if Hugh Baim Steinberg can write 107-line poems, I can certainly write some 17-line poems. So I didn't want them to be 14 lines, like to look too much like a sonnet, but I sort of wanted them to look sonnet-like in their line length. And then I didn't, and I thought 19 would be too corny, like COVID-19. And I didn't think I could write 21 lines. And I like working in odd numbers for some reason. Like I like 3s, 5s. I like 12, but yeah, so that's why. And it was really freeing. I mean, if you can find some formal constraint that you're excited about pushing as far as you can, you should see how many, 17-line poems you can write, or 7-line, 107-line love poems or whatever comes to you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Do it.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your questions. And thanks again, Professor. I'm really glad that we were able to talk about so many different things. And I have put in the chat all the links to your most recent books, the links that you
Thank you.
sent me. And there are certain books that you can order by email. So Caroline Goodwin's email is also there. So please save the chat or copy paste all the links in your Word document if you'd like to. But yeah, that's about it. And let's keep going. I will call upon you, Professor, once again at the end of our open mic to offer us a closing poem. But for now, you can just relax. Thank you so much for your time, your poetry and art, and this conversation. I hope you've loved your time here as well. It was truly healing and wonderful to have you here. With that, we are going to stop recording this segment. Those of you who are in the Zoom room, please stay online for the open mic segment of the evening. To the YouTube audience, thanks for joining in and hope to see you for next month's virtual Belmont Poetry Night. Good night.